Good afternoon, everyone. I hope it's been a great time watching the sessions this morning. We're here today to talk about the future of work. Is remote working the new normal? And if so, what does that mean for government? Not least, what does it mean for all of us, frankly? With me today, we have three great panelists. We have Asha Haji, who is the COO of the Academy, which is a new amazing type of business school, which is trying to develop leaders who will harness new technologies to build a better world, which I think we could all do with right now. We have Antoine Duboscq, who is a sort of veteran of the tech space. He's one of the prescient people panel who 10 years ago, back in 2010, created an amazing business to help teams work together using all sorts of new digital collaborative tools, including cloud storage, online chat, video calls. So I think he's the man to ask about all your tech needs right now. I definitely will after this call. And finally, we have Cecilia Lonning-Skovgaard, who is the mayor of Copenhagen and managing this on the front lines of government right now, particularly around issues of unemployment, which I know are rising around the world, particularly in cities. So with that, those are the introductions, and I'm going to start with Antoine. When we spoke the other day, you were very much interested in some of the paradoxes we face at the moment from working from home. And I wonder if you could sort of unpack them for us in terms of some of the sort of tensions we see between, the opportunities and some of the downfalls.
Yeah, hello. Very happy to be here. And yes, we've been living very intense moments since March, I would say, and even earlier for some. And we've been living three paradoxes, I think, that we've experienced here in France, but that have been experienced in other countries in Europe. The first paradox is we want control from government, and at the same time we want reassurance on privacy and limits on the action of government. So on one side we see a lot of pressure for more rules and controls and protection, and at the same time we see concern about privacy and the way data is being fit. And the second paradox is we've experienced a very strong demand for global solutions, mostly, I must say, from the US. And at the same time, we've seen a rising interest for sovereignty. And almost all countries in Europe and heads of states or heads of government have expressed in some way the need for some kind of digital sovereignty. And the third paradox is people have expressed a will to find new form of freedom to work from home or to work from the place they like to, of their choice. And at the same time, we've seen that this implies some risk of infringement of work on our lives, and we want to protect our lives. My experience is those three paradoxes are just open right now. I don't think anybody has full solutions, all solutions. I think it's a matter for debate, and I think today is a small maybe contribution to that debate.
Great. I'm definitely going to come back to some of those paradoxes, particularly where you fit in the sort of, it's a long-standing argument in the French context about digital sovereignty anyway. So this is just a new paradigm into which to play out some of those arguments and perhaps accelerate them. But I'm going to bring in Asha now, in terms of, you're very much focused on the education space. And I think what you were saying the other day is very much seeing a difference between how innovative private companies can be at this moment versus how innovative government can be, and that they're just trying to deal with a crisis. Whereas perhaps some companies like your own and the companies you work with can perhaps be more agile in responding to the opportunities.
Yeah, 100%. I think what we've observed, especially in the education space, that there's been a rapid, almost gold rush for tech companies, ed tech companies, to provide better solutions for people to upskill, for people to get the credentials that they need, for people to be able to engage in virtual learning in a way that's dynamic and actually focuses on the science of learning, as opposed to, unfortunately, a lot of municipalities and that are providing public education or even just private universities offline learning really struggled, I would say, over the last few months to pivot their education delivery models to meet the needs of students who are now dealing with the restrictions of having to learn from home, having to learn in environments where maybe there's a lot of distractions, having to deal with just uncertainty about their future and where they're going. So it's been a really tough time, I would say, for traditional educational institutions to respond to this crisis. And on the flip side, you're seeing private ed tech companies like ourselves, like others, really just becoming incredibly innovative in response to this and trying to actually fill some gaps here and make a difference for people as quickly as possible.
Great. So, Cecilia, I'm just going to bring you in just in terms of a sort of quick take view from government. Obviously, you're on the front lines of just trying to manage the crisis as well as you can. I wonder if you can just give a perspective on what it's like sitting in, in the mayor's office in Copenhagen as you see unemployment rise and the real tensions at sort of managing people's sense of security versus the kind of inability to be innovative at the same time.
Yes, thank you. And I really think that that is a dilemma in question. We see unemployment numbers rising. We want to provide the best possible assistance to the unemployed in our job centers. And throughout the spring, we had to do that digitally, meaning from the staff's own homes, trying to reach the unemployed via phone or via video conferencing. Lots of things worked. I think, however, when evaluating and still sort of in a very short time frame, we also find that a lot of things are missed when the physical personal interaction is not taking place. And I think we've taken a huge step forward in terms of being able to do things more digitized, but definitely what we look into is probably more of, mixed hybrid models of having digital video conversations with the employees or with the citizens of Copenhagen, while also allowing for the physical meetings because it's so important. And then I think from a managerial point of view, this is a tall order, trying to keep up with the employees, trying to keep them motivated. We have really high turnover in the ranks of Copenhagen. So onboarding new employees, making sure they get up to speed on new legislation and so on, this is proving rather tricky. And obviously, as a final thing, monitoring the efforts of employees while not getting into surveillance or time tracking in measures which would violate GDPR is also something we need to find a proper way of managing going forward.
So what's been the hardest thing in terms of your role about, I think your assistant, when I spoke to her, said that there was a sort of philosophy of using warm hands, which I thought was such a nice way of describing face-to-face encounters by the state with the citizens, having warm hands. And, can you sort of unpack where it's been incredibly challenging to deliver really great government service in your experience?
I think the toughest part has been vis-a-vis the most vulnerable employees. So obviously a lot of frontline tasks have been delivered physically in the elderly homes, in the care homes and so on. But for instance, when we talk to employees, citizens, vulnerable citizens who are unemployed, who struggle with other complex issues, it could be mental illness and so on, really getting a grasp of where they are, whether they are okay, how we best support them is incredibly difficult when you don't sit face to face. So I think, again, finding a way of digitizing the warm hand is still something that remains to be done.
No, I'm going to like, that's a great line. I think we should use that for the conference, digitizing the warm hand. I think that's lovely. So Antoine, given that your business is actually founded in the idea of you do collaborative work better, and also, your business was also founded to try and be independent of some of the traditional big American tech companies. Obviously, we've seen Zoom go from an amazing market cap of 16 billion last April to 138 billion as of this morning. So these are profound opportunities for companies who can get the tech right at these kind of moments. I wonder if you can just give a bit of a colour on what you're seeing from some of your clients or even your government clients about what they are now, what kind of technologies they're now introducing successfully.
We don't have the answers yet. I think it's a matter. There are intense debates at national level and at EU level. We've seen Thierry Breton, the commissioner, who has taken strong positions talking about European sovereignty. We've seen many ministers and high civil servants that have taken positions. However, it's not an easy issue because American platforms and have very strong assets. They have quite often very good services. And so we don't want to lose that. And at the same time, we want to build, I think more and more Europeans want to build European assets, so that the idea would be to probably to find, Europe will need to find its own way. It will not be a full independence as China has decided a few years ago, very strong sovereign targets in terms of GovTech. I think they are really targeting 100% independence in terms of software and data. I don't think this is realistic, and I see nobody pushing for that in Europe. I see various solutions of trying to mix some to reduce the degree of dependency, and to find kind of an equilibrium between European and non-European solutions. And the tech area in Europe is not as mature, of course, as the US one, but is providing nice perspective. I think in the next 2 or 3 years, the landscape will change.
So if you had to guess right now, being realistic, how much of the sort of GovTech used by European governments is largely American tech right now, Antoine?
I would say my understanding in terms of software, so not speaking hardware. The hardware comes mostly from China and from Asia, but the software comes from the US and the ratio would be more than 70%, and the remaining 30% would be mainly how do we call that? Software that's engineered software for specific applications. But the on-shelf software is massively, probably higher than 90% US originating.
Yeah.
And,
so I think.
Yeah.
But do you think that at some point it will be helpful for governments to come in and have not necessarily quotas, but do more to help the European GovTech sector, which is it's a whole new ecosystem now. It's obviously growing all the time. Do you think the governments should be doing more to help European companies?
I think one option, I personally think that one option would be that government, a little bit like what happened with parity some years ago, decide a name, a target that would be around 50% EU software as a target. And I think if we, one of the main obstacles is the cultural obstacle. So, for example, a CIO, Chief Information Officer in an administration or large company usually would go for a US solution, and it's not always because it's better. It's mainly because it's just what we used to do, and in more and more cases there are alternative solutions from European companies. So I think a 50% target would be, I find, kind of reasonable target for the next 3 or 5 years.
So, Asha, you're obviously in a position of probably great sense of opportunity right now, given the space you're in, and the way you frame the debate around the municipalities and unable to be as innovative around delivering education as perhaps companies like yourself. So, can you just paint the landscape for me about what does that mean for sort of education delivery, in the next 5-10 years, in terms of this is an opportunity to really accelerate a totally different way of providing education?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are so many opportunities that I would say have been in the works over the last, 10 years, 15 years. But now this is really COVID is acting more as an accelerant to these opportunities, as opposed to, this being just a brand new conversation that's happening. I would say there's a whole host of areas that I think could be disrupted when it comes to education delivery. I think there's a big conversation around just especially in the States. And I know this applies more and more in Europe as the cost of education has started to rise in certain countries particularly the UK. I know university fees have gone up significantly over the last decade or so. But the idea of micro-credentialing as a potential solution for people, rather than getting into significant debt, going to university, paying, in the US, you could pay up to 100, 150, even more $1,000 for tuition fees to get one big, credential. And arguably that credential might not translate into great career outcomes for a lot of people. So the idea of creating tech solutions where you can have skills-based micro-credentialing for specific roles or tracks that you want in your career is something that a lot of ed tech solutions are supporting, this idea of unbundling education. You're looking at Outlier that's came out recently from the co-founder of Masterclass, and they're already starting to do this by unbundling some of the requirements from universities. So they have a psychology course that's come out recently. They've got a calculus course. Students pay $300 to take this, and they get college university credit for doing these courses remotely. While if you were doing it as part of a university degree, it would be about 20 times that cost just for that one course. So that's just one example of something that I think is going to come into play. But there's a whole host of areas and solutions around personalization for learning, really focusing on lifelong learning, which is our focus area. So allowing people to make learning a habit again and again, as opposed to something that's one and done. Especially with young people, when it comes to children, having educational solutions that allow them to, again, have very personalized, adaptive solutions to meet them where they are in terms of their goals and their learning styles. A lot of these ed tech solutions are thinking about the way people think and as individuals, as opposed to when you're in a schoolhouse, you really have to focus on the 30 students that you're staring at you, and you might not be able to personalize learning for them as easily as a tech solution could.
So how far in your role, Asha, are you working collaboratively with governments, or how far are you basically saying we don't need to talk to governments, we can just create our own sort of go-to-market opportunities, and actually government is not needed anymore in the same way in terms of delivery partner?
It's a great question. I mean, I think what we're offering right now is lifelong learning. And so I think, a lot of times there are skills initiatives that come out from governments that they're really trying to upskill communities. I think we would love to play a role in those types of initiatives going forward. But in all honesty, I think we're actually addressing a gap for most adults that exists, where a lot of them feel lost after they finish their university studies. They don't know where to go in terms of finding additional education and solutions. And I think providing a platform for that is something that's just underserved. It's an underserved solution at the moment.
And Cecilia, as you listen to this debate, half your life is obviously just trying to deal with the real crisis in front of your warm hands, as it were. But how far are you also using this opportunity to rethink how you do different government services?
We're definitely using it as an opportunity, and I think a lot of what Asha just said is spot on. We are rethinking how we train and upskill people who've lost their jobs. I think as in most of your countries, we've seen massive layoffs, not least in the industry, tourism and hospitality sector. And being able to offer more specialized, targeted courses for those who may not be that familiar with several years long education is a focus area right now. The same goes for more traditional education with our schools. I think most Danish teachers, they got a hand of how to just do classroom education online during the spring. But all of the more fine opportunities technology offers, like, letting the children into sub-classrooms, using gamification, making things much more interactive. There's a massive way to go and a lot to learn, but we are trying to evaluate what we learned from the spring and to look into, what are the options with the largest potential and which things should we then aim for.
And Antoine, given that you see this from a different perspective, are you actually impressed by how far governments are rethinking what they can do and their capabilities, or actually, or is it sort of that you're more impressed by private companies and their ability to be responding to this moment?
Well, I wrote to the Prime Minister in France just before the confinement, the crisis, because I thought that the civil servants were not fully prepared for that. So we tried to help as we could. There was a first phase, I must say, of kind of denial from authorities, and now it's been widely accepted, the fact that there is a huge challenge of change of work, and it's not just about software. I'm working on the software side, but I realized that that software is not the main issue. The issue, and it's not even training about software. It's the change of way of working, and especially for jobs that used to be very segregated, very each in its compartment box, those tools and this crisis opens up new ways of working. And so I think we are realizing that the challenge is not just about technology. Technology is a tool, but the tool actually changes the way we organize ourselves, and that requires a much more open approach to work.
And did the French government react warmly to your criticism?
Well, initially, I must say it was just a technical thing. So we helped in a series of local governments, local agencies, ministries. We provided services so that the state could face the resilience, could be resilient. And actually, and we were not the only players in that field, but many other helped in some way. And the government in the media asked for help from the French tech. And that prompted a general movement, which was helpful. But now I think we are arriving to the next phase where we need to tackle the deeper challenges of not only training, but also changing the way we work and opening and creating a new culture of work, more open, more collaborative work.
In fact, we have a great question for Cecilia from someone in the audience, which is, can you speak to any leadership or management mentality changes that you've had to sort of introduce to allow municipal workers to work from home successfully?
I think definitely that this has been a leap forward in terms of delegating authority, showing and really believing that our frontline workers they're up for it, because as much as we can call them in for weekly team meetings or one-to-one meetings with their managers, most of what they're now doing they're doing single-handedly from at home. And we're not there yet in our development phase where we could do that, track employee or sort of citizen feedback, ratings and so on. So it's really, up to our frontline staff to conduct the work in the manner they see best. And I think the culture change there in terms of delegating authority, delegating and providing that trust that they can actually, live up to that responsibility is something we can definitely build upon going forward.
And Asha, I'm going to ask you a question, which is, again, from the audience, which is, do you think that remote work will have a negative effect on the integration of the international workforce? Now, that's quite a big question, but I think it's quite an interesting one about how, since we're all working from the access to global skills, and the whole debate about global skills and outsourcing is changing quite fast in terms of how you can build teams and put them together. So I wonder if you can touch on that, Asha, in terms of how you're seeing a new volatility in workforces and to put them together again in different ways. You don't have to move countries in quite the same way.
Exactly. I mean, I think I've already been, I'm on a lot of mailing lists with different COOs here in the UK talking about team expansion in response to this crisis. And a lot of them have been opening up positions in new markets that they haven't been exploring prior to this, right? So they're asking for advice on employment law in Poland, employment law, in parts of Middle East, et cetera, because they found great talent, in the right time zones, but in much different areas that they would not have considered before. So I don't see it as a negative. Potentially, I think it's an opportunity to really globalize workforces and figure out how to create new norms for working, such that you can make sure that people don't have that feeling of being isolated in a satellite office, and they don't feel like they're integrated with the rest of the team and can align. I think this opens up opportunities to create standards for everyone to be on the same playing field.
So we only have less than a minute left, so this is too big a question, but if anyone has a quick answer about the best example that you've seen from government being particularly innovative around tech at the moment. So any of you can answer. Cecilia.
Yes, we are introducing a set of VR glasses enabling newly unemployed to be trained for interviews. And at least sort of as a municipality in the Nordics, that's pretty innovative.
Great. Well, we have 16 seconds left, so I'm gonna wrap up very quickly. So I think the quote I want to take away is that digitising warm hands as a slogan for this theme. 50% ambition for European software companies to dominate GovTech. And Asha, we know you're coming, and then we can all sign up for lifelong learning classes with Asha. So thank you very much to the panel, and thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.